It's no secret that the Montreal Canadiens and the Vancouver Canucks are both in need of some forward support. We've been talking about this the entire season. Montreal and Vancouver could use some centers. Montreal now has Josh Waugh in a pretty decent spot in the lineup. Jared Davidson is over here as well. You do have some injuries. You do have some guys that have been removed. And so, now's as good a time as any to talk about players that could be linked to either of these two teams. And in fact, we had two conversations sparking up over the past few days that I did think were interesting enough to smush together in a video commentary here. We could make videos about these guys individually, but I do think that it's not really that big of a deal, so we'll just put them together, combine them. Starting out with the Montreal Canadiens, because I wanted to turn your attention to one of the more famous French hockey players in the NHL these past few years. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Alexandre Texier, a guy whom we have made videos about over the past few years. And when I say Frenchman, he literally is a Frenchman. He was a Calder dark horse back in 2020 alongside of Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar. And Texier is from Grenoble, France. He ain't French-Canadian, folks. He is legitimately French. He's 26 years old, 6'1", 194, center-left wing, left-handed guy, drafted by Columbus back in 2017, and he inevitably became a Blue Jacket in 2019-20. He was a really strong contender in that season as just an out-of-nowhere, under-the-radar rookie that all of a sudden had an impact with the Blue Jackets, getting 3 points in 8 playoff games 2 years after being drafted. Unfortunately for Texier, though, it seems like, I don't remember 100%, but it seemed like there might have been some homesickness issues. There were some things that he had to attend to back home, which is why in 22-23, Texier went back to the Swiss League, and he represented France on the international stage. Then he went back over to Columbus, had 30 points in 78 games played 2 seasons ago. That was when he was 24, and inevitably, Texier got traded to the St. Louis Blues. Now that's all fine and dandy, until you acknowledge that this 26-year-old only scored 1 point in 8 Blues games this season. And then we had this update from Blues Muse. Alexandre Texier, in correspondence to Jake Neighbors' activation from the IR, has been designated non-roster status by the Blues. Texier played 39 career games for St. Louis with 12 points. He is likely to be put on waivers shortly, and this was posted earlier yesterday morning. Elliotte Friedman then confirmed the matter later in that same night. Yes, Texier on waivers, and also he is on regular waivers, not to terminate. But it is possible we go down the termination route if Texier goes unclaimed. Blue99 said, "That's sad, as he is a good player. Solid NHLer, but the game is moving to speed and not as much as hard to forecheck. He's got to retool, and he'll be back on a good team." Now, why exactly are we talking about the Montreal Canadiens here? Well, it's because of what Elliotte Friedman expanded upon on his recent 32 Thoughts article. Take a look at this tweet from Habs Digest, Friedman from the Written 32. "There are rumors that Texier is considering terminating his deal like David Kampf. Would Texier make sense for Montreal? The Canadiens are looking to plug injury holes. The standings are tight, so a few white flags are waving." Now, the funny part is the top reply on this tweet is from Grant McKegg. "Can Texier stop pucks?" And, no, unfortunately he can't do that, but he is still a pretty versatile and skilled French forward who has made waves in the NHL the past few years. Admittedly, he hasn't fully lived up to the potential that he had displayed when he was scoring all those points for Columbus in the playoffs in 2019, but he has been down a rocky path, and he did score 30 points in 78 games 2 seasons ago. I do think that Texier, with the versatility, the hands that he has, the skill, he can provide some element of value for the Montreal Canadiens. That is, if the Canadiens decide to take a waiver claim at him, or let him get terminated and then sign him once more after, a la a David Kampf and the Vancouver Canucks. If any Blue Jackets fans or Blues fans are watching this video, hey, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. How has Texier played, and what is the scouting report on this guy in 2025? Didn't really seem like he had too good of a fit with the Blues this season, and that's referenced by him getting placed on waivers in the first place and not really being one of the main guys to stick around post Jake Neighbors activation. But it does seem like Texier is in a vulnerable spot and could be looking for a change of scenery elsewhere. Now, speaking about that David Kampf, I wanted to go out there and talk about another player that we could potentially link to the Vancouver Canucks. Here's a tweet posted by Frank Saravalli earlier yesterday afternoon. League sources say that Winnipeg Jets forward Brad Lambert, his representation has been granted permission to find a trade partner. Lambert, 21, has 1 goal in 4 games for the Jets in limited minutes this season. Now, Brad Lambert is a name that I am very intrigued by. This is a 21-year-old center right wing, 6 feet 183, a right-handed guy who was drafted 30th overall by the Winnipeg Jets in 2022. The thing about Lambert is, you might actually recognize his name because we did make a few videos about this guy back in the day. Here's one from 2019 talking about Brad Lambert, the generational Finnish prospect of the 2022 NHL Entry Draft. There was a period back in 2019, 2020-ish, 2-3 seasons before Lambert was even drafted, that said that this guy could have been a first overall caliber player. It was Wright, Savoy, and Lambert. That was the big 3 heading into 2022. Unfortunately, though, Lambert, despite the skill and despite the point production, he didn't go until 30th overall in the 2022 draft. It was a weird season for him in the Finnish Liga. He didn't really produce all too much, but inevitably he went over to the Seattle Thunderbirds and he totally lit that scene up in the WHL. Lambert then spent the next few years cooking with the Manitoba Moose, 55 points in 64 games there, 35 points in 61 games the next season, and this season he has been up and down, only scoring 1 point in 4 Winnipeg Jets games. The Winnipeg Jets, unfortunately, they don't need the best out of Brad Lambert right now because they're kind of a wagon. They've been doing very well and their team is very good, so Brad Lambert, in a tough spot, not able to break onto a team that is this talented, it is going to be a tough road for Lambert to establish NHL minutes as a top 6 skilled forward with a team as skilled as Winnipeg. Which is why we go back over onto Twitter and we take a look at what Murat Ats goes out there and says, I don't know much about this. It seems reasonable to assume that Lambert's potential trade request is tied to frustration with his AHL demotion. If Lambert's camp says he's an NHL guy and Winnipeg says by all means gauge interest, then what comes next? The answer depends on a few things. It doesn't have to end with a trade. Lambert's camp could find a suitor, or someone could get hurt and Lambert could be called right back up. But the Jets have leverage with Lambert on his ELC through 2027. He may have to play through it. Now, let's dive into what Tyson Cole went out there and said about this, saying that the Vancouver Canucks have already dipped their toes into the former first-round pick C. Wouldn't be surprised if they poke around on this one as well. Lambert has struggled at the NHL level, but has had decent AHL production. The Finn would probably welcome a move to Vancouver with the minutes for the taking down the middle of the ice. And that is absolutely true here. Vancouver already took a swing on another Finnish center who slipped in his draft year, Inatu Ratu. They also had other players like Lucas Reichel. They also had other players like Daniel Sprong. They take a lot of these younger guys that did have success in their draft eligibility, but who fell off afterwards. And Brad Lambert hasn't necessarily fallen off. He's just a guy that hasn't really found his footing at the National Hockey League level. This is a name that I think Vancouver might be able to take a look at and say, yeah, that's a guy. I am very intrigued at the possibility of acquiring Brad Lambert, and as somebody who happens to believe in the long-term talent of prospects that are as good as Lambert can be, I actually praise this idea. Getting one Seattle Thunderbirds guy in the system, and then, of course, Braden Coots is another Thunderbirds guy. Petey, Lambert, Coots long-term. I like that idea a lot, actually. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the idea of Montreal going after Alexandre Texier? What are your thoughts on the idea of Vancouver targeting Brad Lambert from Winnipeg? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.